We're going to look at doing our subtractive and additive reliefs today. So you'll need to create a clay slab about the thickness of a pencil. So you would take your brick of clay, push it out, use a rolling pin until it's about that thickness of that pencil, and then stop. We want these to be either square, rectangle, oval, or circle shapes that are about the size of your hand when we work with these for this particular project. So I'm going to trim off my extra edges. I'm going to save those because I'm using them for the additive part. And I'm going to go through and square this off a little bit. If you want it to be a little bit more perfect, you can always make a square template first to trace, or you can just get pretty close while you're working with it. So now I have this. I've been planning my initial already, so I'm going to do all three of my initials in here. So I'm going to start with just drawing the outline. The other way you can do this is to put your paper directly on top of here and push down with a pencil, and those initials would just kind of poke gently into your clay, and you would know where you're going to be working. First, middle, last for me, just like that. And the first thing I want to do with my initials is I want to do subtractive. So there's a couple different tools I can use. I want to look for things that have loops in them, similar to these, because what you do is you put the loop down in there and you pull gently sideways. You don't want to push too deep to start, and you'll notice it pulls up the clay. It carves it out of there. You're going to take that off and just set it to the side. You're going to keep working within that first initial, or whichever one you start with, until you have it where you want it. You want to be careful you don't go more than halfway through your slab, or it might get too thin. Smooth this out a little bit in the middle. Kind of liking the depth that it's at for that relief part. If I want to smooth it out, I can just get my little slip cup and get my finger wet and gently push and smooth out the sections that maybe are a little bit more bumpy than others. So this is the subtractive part. I'm subtracting clay from my initial, right, for that one. And then I'm going to subtract from my last one. Carefully remove it. Don't want to go too deep. So it's better to have to go back and go a little deeper each time than to do it too deep the first time and not be able to add back in. Like that. I can get my finger wet, smooth out those edges, the inside. With the subtractive part. Now, if I want to do some additive, for example, if I want to add to my R, that means make it come up off the page, I could take some of those scraps that I had. See, this is why I say keep those scraps around. You might need them. And remember, if I'm adding anything, I have to score and slip. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to score it first. I'm going to rough it up with one of my pointier tools. Okay. I have to do the same thing to the back side of the pieces that I'm adding. We have to create that zipper effect so that those pieces zip together. You'll notice I'm also taking the rougher side of that clay where I'm scoring and slipping because I don't want it to show. It's not as pretty as the front side that's nice and smooth. So I'm going to lay it on there and see if it fits. That one fits the right way. I'm going to add my slip to it, some of that slimy clay. And I'm going to wiggle and firmly push those together so that now this would be an additive piece I have added to that clay relief on there. So I'm going to be a bit more careful with because I have to bend this one around the edge of that R. I'm going to trim it in place, just like that. I'm going to add a little bit more to the inside. There we go. And then I can keep my finger moist with some of that. I can smooth those out so it looks like one single piece. Same thing with connecting it back over here to this edge. And you see how the middle got a little kind of rowdy, a little crazy there? I can take one of my smaller loop tools, kind of like this one, and I can go down in there and I can remove or subtract some of that clay to help smooth it out. I can even use the other end of the tool to kind of tap it down and round it out if my fingers aren't small enough to fit in there. Yours might be small enough to fit down in there. Measure out this piece, make sure it's the right length before I trim it. Add some of that slip in there. Gently but firmly push. And then I'm going to smooth this up into the R. Kind of like that. All of those pieces the way I want them, smooth them out a little bit. So now I have subtractive and additive. Now this is kind of boring in and of itself and on its own, so I'm going to add some things to it. Maybe even things that represent me. So I am an artist, I like to do art things. Maybe I would add a pencil to it, right? So I'm going to take a piece of this. It's about the same length, so I'm going to have to cut it a little shorter. And then I'm going to do some of that coiling. So I'm going to turn this into a coil, which of course is going to look like a pencil. You got it. I'm going to get it to pencil thickness, not just because it's pencil, but because that's always our goal when we're working with clay. And it's going to be way too long to fit on here, so I'm going to have to trim it off a little bit, which is okay because now I need to give it a point since it's a pencil, right? There we go, kind of like that. Make it pointy. And then I'm going to smooth out that eraser end. And it's harder to see right now, but when I paint it up with the paint or the glaze later, you'll really be able to see and understand what it is. I can even go back in with a tool and draw some pencil type lines on it to help reinforce to people who are looking at my artwork what it is they're seeing. They'll recognize it more if it has those little pencil-like lines on it where the eraser connects. I can just gently roll that and add those in. And then it would have another line here. And I'm doing these lines very gently, very much on the surface. Now, of course, if I'm going to attach it, I have to score and slip. Always, always score and slip when you're attaching things. This is an additive piece. So I'm going to put it up here, gently but firmly push down to make sure it's attached. And if there's any extra score lines showing, I can just take my wet finger with some slip on it and smooth those out. So there's one thing that's about me. What else? I like flowers. So I'm going to use another piece of my clay. I'm going to roll it out a little bit over here on the side. Okay. And this is going to be skinnier than pencil thickness, which makes it really hard to get up off the table. You might want to roll it out on some paper. You can also just form these by hand by taking little bits. I'm going to do a flower. So these are going to be all the little petals in the flower. And I have to start with my bigger petals first, which will go in the back. And I'm not going to make these totally smooth because sometimes flowers have a little bit of texture to them. And pinch it around the base to make it sort of into that cup shape. You might already be thinking, well, I like baseball and hockey, so maybe you're going to do a bat and a ball or a glove. Those are great ideas too. I'm going to put the flower down here. So I'm going to score it down here really well. Put the slip on there. I'm going to start the first petal off the edge. Grab another bigger piece to do a petal with. If you're doing hockey, you might do a puck and a stick, or you could even do a face mask. If you get really ambitious, it means you want to try that next level up in art class. Love it when I see students do that. So I'm just going to keep adding these petals and layers with scoring and slipping. I'm going to speed that up for you guys. Okay, Okay, now I've done a few different little additive pieces to my artwork. I want to work some more on the subtractive. So some other things I like and enjoy would be geocaching, which kind of takes place out in nature. So maybe I want to carve some grass stems down here along the bottom. I'm going to find a tool that looks like it's good for taking out small amounts of clay to do that with. And then I can just start kind of scratching that out. And you'll notice when you scratch it out, it'll fill up on your tool. You'll need to pull that off once in a while. There we go. And I have to do this one at a bit of an angle if I want them to be pokier looking. I might want to go a little bit deeper so when I paint them later they show up better. If you go too shallow, they don't like to show up as much. Smooth out some of these areas that are getting a little rough around the edges by taking that clay off or pushing it down a little bit. Just like that. And since we're taking away, that means that this is some more subtractive type clay relief. There we go. So now I have some grass down at the bottom. Maybe I want to do a couple little birds in the distance out here, those little M-shaped birds you see sometimes when they're flying really far away. Or eagles look like that when they're flying out in the distance here in Minnesota. Smooth down any extras. Pull some of that clay out of there. Doing that subtractive part, we're subtracting clay, taking away. Go. And then if you want, the other thing that you can look at doing would be a pattern in the background, and then you could just do something as simple as taking a tool and repeating that pattern back and forth across that square in the background. And you can change it as you go, or you can keep it the same. That would be totally up to you. When you're finished, it goes back in the clay drying area to be fired.